Hey everybody, this is Sergio with the Rideshare Guy and Show Me the Money. So today I'm joined by Joe from Chicago. And Joe is an integral part of our research that we do. He's become my eyes and ears, one of many drivers around the country that send me evidence that about what we're going to talk about. And we've been talking about on Show Me the Money Club. But Joe, before we get into that, please introduce yourself. How many years you've been on the apps, which apps, how many trips you got under your belt, etc.
First, I'm glad to be here. I've been doing gig work for about 8 years, or almost 8 years this August. Most of that has been part-time. Since the pandemic, it's been more full-time. I do Uber, Lyft. I've done Amazon Flex. I've done some Shipt. So I've tried to do some different platforms. Total of about 18,400 rides on Uber and Lyft. About 4,000 of those are on Lyft.
How's it been lately in Chicago? It's one of the better markets as far as we're concerned. How's it been going last few months?
It was good up until the 4th of July weekend. There was surge all the time. It was easy to go out there and make money. The last couple of weeks, we've hit the summer doldrums, and so it's a lot of gray clouds. Not as busy, not as much surge
Yeah,
going on. Yeah,
those
I think
wonderful,
it's
those
normal.
wonderful
That's
gray
normal during the
clouds
summer. Yeah,
with those wonderful $3, $4 signs. I'm not sure
yeah,
what their plan is, but I don't think it's going to work out. I think a lot of drivers are figuring out that this is a bunch of nonsense. And I mean, they may quit. I don't know. But macroeconomic conditions are such that, people need the cash and, they're out there driving. But besides that, obviously, you've been around 8 years. In 8 years, you've seen a lot. Such you've been on the platforms longer than I
yeah,
have.
yeah.
I've been around for 7 years, and I've seen my share of rate cuts. And when I mean rate cuts, I mean off of time and distance. Okay.
Yeah.
So about October of last year in LA, I'm pretty sure it was about the same time, or maybe a little earlier in Chicago.
Mhm.
Both companies, both rideshare companies, introduced something called upfront fares for the drivers.
Yeah.
Well, with upfront fares, it came also something drivers were asking for a decade, basically to see where the passenger is going before we accept the offer. Right? And I think it's
Mhm.
wonderful that we finally have that choice. But I think ultimately now this is turning into to us, at least on Show Me the Money, into a shaving contest. We call it shaving because we honestly don't know how we get paid, why a trip at the same time will cost or will pay more under the same circumstances. We just don't know. They just say
No
we're going
sense.
to reinvent the wheel. We're not
Mhm.
in the transportation business. We just have an algorithm that spits out a price by calculating 70 different things in a millisecond. So I'm not a
Yeah.
huge fan of upfront fares. So let's talk a little bit about upfront fares. Are you a fan of upfront fares?
No. No, I mean I'm a big fan of having the information up ahead of time, how long the trip is going to be, where we're going. But the upfront fares it just makes no sense to me. Every time Uber or Lyft have said they're going to make it easier or they're going to make it more transparent, it's actually the complete opposite. And now it's like you guys talk about it all the time on the show. It's a big black box. Nobody knows what's actually happening, and the same trip for different drivers is priced differently. It makes no sense. And so they're clearly doing whatever they can. You've talked about everybody has their own file on their server. They're pricing everything for each individual. And every time you go out there, it feels like you're fighting with the algorithm to try and give you the best rides. And the only way to do it is with like cherry picking and trying to pay attention to what's going on. Yeah.
I agree 1,000,000% with you if there is such a number. And
Mhm.
to us, look, we're trying to investigate a lot of these things. We're trying to make the drivers more efficient, right? And it seems like we're losing this battle, Joe, because with
Yeah.
upfront fares, honestly, every day they're changing something in there that we're just kind of chasing a ghost, right?
Hmm.
We through drivers like you who know what they're doing. We get a lot of screenshots and we put them up and we talk about it. We hold their feet to the fire, but it's
Hmm.
so tiring to chase these things in such a simple business that it is. Picking up a point A, dropping off a point B. Why do we need all these complicated situations, right?
Yeah.
But so Joe has become, as I said at the start of the interview, my eyes and ears, one of my eyes and ears in Chicago. We have a lot of drivers, big community in Chicago. And he knows his stuff. So a lot of drivers send me, files, screenshots, spreadsheets, all this stuff.
Hmm.
Joe's one that I've been in contact with for at least 6 months now, and his
Yeah.
work is my proof. I mean, I'll go to bat for Joe anytime because his stuff is so well documented. There's so much proof in there
Hmm.
that I felt compelled to have him on. So we've been talking about Joe about this, how upfront fares has become almost charity now, right?
Yeah.
Because we, as drivers, as everybody should be on the planet, time is money. It seems like though these companies are kind of disregarding that statement. They're
Hmm.
like, time is no value to us, specifically your driver's time. I mean, on
Hmm.
Lyft, I'm not going to work for an hour for free, I'm sure, or
Yeah.
Uber. A coder is not going to say, I'm just working this next 2 hours free for you, right? Well, under upfront fares, it seems like a lot of shaving is going on. We call it shaving. That every trip is underestimated by a few minutes to the pickup and to the drop off on these
Hmm.
platforms. And at the end of the day, if you're going to do 20 trips, which most reasonably half full time drivers do, we just lost 60 minutes, which
Hmm.
under the old time and distance model, we would have gotten paid for. So, talk to me a little bit about this, how you discovered this, what kind of evidence you collected. I know what I have from you, and it's going to mainstream media shortly. And tell me in your own words, what's going on? What are you experiencing?
Well, part of it is in Chicago, and you know this in LA, in large markets where it's highly congested. It's the time that matters. The trip can be 1 mile long, but it could take you 15 minutes. So even if you're getting $1 a mile or $2 a mile, it makes no sense. It makes no sense to take that trip. You have to look at the time and figure out how much you're getting paid per hour. So usually what I've been doing is focusing on how much per hour a trip is worth. So a $7 trip for 20 minutes is a $21 trip per hour, is a simple example. I try and focus and try and get trips that are at least 30 because I know I'm not going to be, I'm not going to have 100% utilization. I know I'm actually going to be making less per hour, but that's my goal, is to try and hit those $30 plus per hour rides. And so, and paying attention to the time, I'm looking at the time when the trip comes in. I'm looking at the time to the passenger, and then the time from picking up the passenger to the length of the trip. So if it's 5 minutes to pick up the passenger in a 10-minute trip, or it's a 15-minute trip. And again, we're kind of losing sight of the fact that we also have to sit there and wait, sometimes up to 7 minutes with Uber. So
Exactly.
that's also takes time out of your hour.
Yeah.
At the very least, you can control what you're picking with regards to distance to the passenger, and then the length of the trip. And I was noticing, and this is especially a problem with Lyft. Uber does it as well, but they seem to be a little closer to the target. But Lyft has been pretty egregious, and you've even showed screenshots on your show where you're with those longer trips where it's like an hour over, and they don't pay you for that time. And the reason for that, and I spent a great deal of time going through customer service, going through their chat, going through several customer service reps. I finally got someone who claimed to be a manager, and basically it boiled down to them telling me once the trip is started, time doesn't matter. The only reason they would make an adjustment is if the distance changes. So in my case, it was a 15-minute trip that ended up going 25 minutes, but the distance was the same. And that's what started the discussion with Lyft. On your channel, you've shown a couple of screenshots where it was, a 3-hour trip or a 2-hour trip, and the miles were the same. It was like an 89-mile trip. The miles were the same. It was the time that changed, and the driver didn't get paid for that change. And it boils down to the fact that they will not adjust based on time once a trip is started.
Yeah. Let me just interrupt him for a second.
Hmm.
What he's talking about is our 63rd episode for Show Me the Money. Now,
Hmm.
we show the egregious, violations of our time. I'm going to call it that, right? I mean, you're violating my time. In this world, there's one thing you cannot get back, is time. That
Hmm.
time is lost. Well, I want to get compensated for my time. Under all mile and minute situation or rate card, we were like a cab. The meter is ticking, and that we would have gotten paid for that time. Now, with upfront fares, we're not. That's a fact. However, in Joe's case, he's, all this evidence I have, and in his case, he has done such an amazing job documenting how this time and mileage shaving is happening that is unquestionable.
Hmm.
Granted, on longer trips, they're saying it. So please go check episode 63 on Show Me the Money, and you'll see all the screenshots and evidence of Lyft support, just like they admitted to Joe, that
Yeah.
time is of no essence. I'm going like, there is something wrong with that. What do you think about that, Joe? I mean, do you think this is something that you discovered by luck, or do you think this is like something that you intentionally were looking into?
I was looking at it intentionally because I was seeing it affect my per hour. I was seeing them giving me trips where they're telling me it's going to take 10 minutes and it ends up taking me 20. And there's no adjustment. There's no increase to the fare. And they're basically stealing time is what they're doing.
So
You
give me like some color on your conversations with um I don't know if they're AI bots support, whatever they are, because as we know, Lyft went to only in-app chat support. Unless you're platinum, then I guess you
mm,
can call somebody. But
been through
which
chat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, give me a little more color about the conversation
Uh,
and the back and forth, because I know you don't quit. I know you try to squeeze them. Although, what they do is very well is they end the conversation. The new person will come in and say, "Well, how can I help you?" And then you have to restart all over again, right?
yeah.
Which is like
Yeah.
completely debilitating. I just worked 10 hours, driving people around. Now I have to chase my tail to get a couple of bucks out of you,
Mhm.
right? It's ridiculous. But give me a little color about those conversations that you've had.
Well, it's one of those things where you start the chat and you explain to them the situation, and they say they're going to look into it, or they're going to try and help you out. And if you don't sit on the chat and wait for the response, then they say, "Oh, it looks like you're not here. We're going to end the chat," or they're not going to answer the question. They decide to end the chat, and so you have to keep on them. You have to keep renewing the chat because it'll automatically cancel out
Yeah.
if you don't respond. They'll close it out within an hour if you don't respond. And so I keep responding. It's like, hey, what's going on? I'm still here, you know. And after a while, it's just like anything else with it, as human beings go. Sometimes you get frustrated.
Yeah.
A little profanity slips in there, which I try and use strategically to push them to try and grab their attention, because otherwise they're just gonna gloss over the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so I've had a couple chats with them. One in particular, I mean, you've got all the screenshots
Yeah.
where I'm pushing them and pushing them, and this is maybe the third or the fourth representative that I've been connected to, and the person finally admits that time doesn't matter. Once a trip starts, you're paid the upfront fare if the distance is the same. And I was like, that can't be right. That's wrong. It's just that makes no sense. And so I keep pushing, and I try and finally somebody comes on, says they're a manager. I get a link to their terms of service, which includes reasons for extending the trip.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of examples in there, but they have to do with changes to the trip by the passenger, extending the trip, but it's not an exhaustive list.
Yeah.
And they're hiding behind the fact that they think length of trip only applies to distance.
Yeah.
It doesn't apply to time. So as long as the distance is the same and you haven't altered your course, they're not going to adjust the fare. Plain and simple.
Yeah, and
Um,
this is all evidenced. I mean, in the screenshots. I mean, as you all know, as rideshare drivers, obviously, you know, um, there are different colors for the chat boxes, right? So one is the driver's side, one is Lyft support side. It's pretty clear what these people are saying. They're just saying, hey, man, your time is of no consequence to me. I really don't care. So even if you do a trip, if you do 20 trips today and our systems suck, we just kind of misjudged the duration because we have no idea how horrible traffic could be in a major city like Joe said, LA, Chicago, DC, whatever. I go like, oh, what's the big deal? You lose 3 minutes, 4 minutes on each trip. And Joe made a great point, by the way. That does not include the waiting part for the passenger to get their butt in the car. But that's given anyway. But we're not even figuring that part out yet. We're just talking about getting compensated for time with our engine running, maintenance, gas, insurance, all that stuff, which we have to include in our cost per mile analysis. If we listen to their CEOs, they're saying treat this like a business.
Yeah.
In what business time is not important? Right? I'm saying as an independent contractor, if I go give a bid, which we don't anyway, but how is that not important? I mean, I'm going to complete the job in 10 minutes. That's what you're telling me. And that's the contract I'm expecting to receive.
Yeah.
And I accept. Now, if it goes 5 minutes longer, why should I not get compensated for that? And if I did 20 trips on 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, shaving as we call it, that's 60 minutes, 100 minutes. That's a lot. Multiply that times millions of drivers, Joe. Figure that out, man.
And part of what I've done with the chats in order to try and to get more out of these representatives is to try and put it in terms that they could understand. Where I will directly ask them, if you go into work, you're scheduled to work for 8 hours, and a manager comes to you at the end of the day and says, I know you did great work today, but we're only going to pay you for 6.5 of your time, right? Is that fair? And that usually gets them to respond again and to get them further into the chat. But for me, it's more with every trip. If you're going to be taking 2 minutes extra on the pickup, you're going to take an extra 2 or 3 minutes or more if it's a longer trip on the trip portion. Then you're talking, like you said, in an 8-hour shift. If you're doing 20 rides, that's an hour and a half. Hour and a half of your time that you're not getting paid for, but your wheels are running, your gas is running, your time is being taken, and it's simply not fair.
Well,
I have a chat.
I know the fair side, but what happens is that if it wasn't for drivers like you consistently nailing these people to the wall, right? I wouldn't even be talking about this because you opened my eyes to this, and we're going to pursue this. Obviously, look, I personally want to get rid of upfront fares. What do you say? Would it be okay to get rid of upfront fares?
Oh, certainly.
Go back to the time and distance.
From everything I've heard, I really would like to see that Washington model go nationwide. Sure, you need to make adjustments for cost of living in different cities and different states, but if you get a fare upfront per minute per mile rate, I mean, I've got an acceptance rate of less than 10%.
Yeah.
So I'd rather take every trip. I don't want to sit there and waste time trying to find a decent trip. I'd rather take every trip, make my money, and go home instead of having to waste all that time.
Yeah, well, these people think it's a game. See what I mean? It's like I said, it's such a simple thing. I pick up passenger, point A, drop them off at point B. I'm done. Next one. Give me fair pay. I'm willing to work for you. But if you're going to play these games, right?
Yeah.
Why? This is not rocket science. Yes. I'm just not getting the idea, right? I know what they're doing. I know exactly what they're doing. Because lost time and money, which equals money to us, is gained time and money to them. Because I'm pretty sure on the back end, yes, they send an upfront fare to the passenger. And if the trip goes longer or if there's any changes, specifically if the passenger changes the destination, they're getting ripped. And we're not getting any of that, right? So to me, this is more than a driver issue. This is also, we need to educate the passengers now because look, man, willy-nilly, you're sitting there changing the destination, but I'm not getting paid for this. I'm just working for charity here, right? So in the remaining couple of minutes, tell me what you think, how we can change this. What should we do? I mean, you're an intelligent guy. You've done your research. Maybe we cannot get it upfront fares. My thought was this. Let me see if you agree with this. One of my thought is, in the old days, if a trip went 5 minutes longer and a mile longer, right? Under upfront fares, they're not paying. But in the old days, the meter was running. They were paying us by
Mhm.
miles and minutes. It's simple. You can't cheat on that, right?
Mhm.
What if we accept the upfront fare, right? And then the trip goes 2 minutes longer. Pay me for those 2 minutes with the old rate card that you had. Like, upfront fare part is done. Now we're in overtime. You know what I mean? It's paying.
Mhm.
We had accepted those rates in our cities in LA
That would be
6021.
perfectly acceptable. Yeah.
Easily done. No, don't you think it's easily done? I mean, you
Yeah.
can still rip the passenger off. I don't care. As long as I'm getting compensated for my time, right?
Exactly. Yeah. In fact, I don't see them giving in is the problem.
Yep.
They figured out a way to hide everything. Every time they say they're going to make something simpler or more clear, it's the complete opposite.
Yep.
And so I don't see them giving in because this is the way that they can boost their profits. And I just had another conversation with Lyft this weekend through chat where I'll be sending you I'll send
I'm
you all the
sure.
screenshots. But in this one where I actually sent them screenshots of the rides I was taking that day of how they were different from the estimate. And I was like, this can't be fair. What's going on? And their response was to tell me maybe it's my phone or my internet connection. It's like, how is that possible? Uber gives me fairly decent upfront estimates. I mean, sometimes they're off too, but they're not as bad.
Yeah.
You fire up Waze or Google Maps, and they give you accurate estimates.
Yeah.
And I'm using the same phone and the same service.
Yeah.
Why is it Lyft can't give me the same thing?
Well, what
And
they're
she's
doing, to their not that I'm going to defend them, but
yeah,
Uber has their internal nav handled pretty much, and they're pretty accurate, right? Because they're a bigger company, they have more spending power. Google, I mean, Lyft still does not have their internal nav figured out that it sees traffic patterns, it sees all the, detours, all that stuff, right? So Lyft is completely like off the whack. Granted, Uber, same thing. Once in a while you'll run into a trip that'll going to take you a couple, 3 extra minutes or whatever.
yeah,
But, not that I want to swallow that either, by the way. I mean, it's
no,
not like this is just Lyft that we're pounding on. It's not. All these companies are doing that. Even on food delivery, if you do food delivery, you'll see it because this tells me half hour. It takes 35 minutes. What happened to my 5 minutes? It wasn't my
hmm
fault. The food wasn't ready.
hmm
Or, in rideshare case, okay, it's not my fault that your systems did not see. And you're supposed to be technology companies. I'm like,
hmm
something is wrong with this picture. So,
well,
with that said, this is not the last you guys are going to see of Joe. Okay.
yeah.
Joe is
And
truly
if
a gem when it comes to information, and he knows what he's doing. He squeezes these people at Lyft support until they go, God, we got to get rid of this guy somehow. So, in closing, tell us about, where you see rideshare, where you see this upfront fare things that we're chasing. You think we're chasing our tail here, or what's happening here?
we may be, but if I may, I one of the reasons I wanted to get in touch with you and to try and promote this or try and bring this to light is that as a driver, you have to protect your own time and your own resources. You can't just let them steal that time because that's the only way you're going to make money. And I've repeatedly spoken with Lyft about this, where I've mentioned it to them. It's like, as a driver, in order to protect ourselves, our only option is when we see this happening is to cancel the trip. Don't take the trip. You're going to waste time on the trip, and then you're going to waste time in chat trying to get them to pay you for it. And their terms of service explicitly say that a driver has the right to accept, decline, or cancel any trip. If you're seeing that your time is being stolen, uh, cancel the trip. If
Yeah,
you get a request where it says it's 3 minutes away, but right off the bat, that first leg they're adding 3 minutes, it's going to be 6 minutes to pick up. They're stealing your time.
yeah,
And so, as a driver, you have to look out for yourself because Lyft and Uber are not going to look out for you. So you have to
absolutely.
look out for yourself. And if you see that happening, you cancel the trip, you move on to the next one.
Yeah. I mean, I we're gonna finish here, Joe, but this is again, I said this is not the last time we're gonna see Joe because Joe's gonna be integral part of what we're doing here because drivers like him and around the country are the ones that are gonna help me, get our voices out. I mean, look, I just kind of, I'm the mouthpiece. It's easy. My job is easy. But I drive too. I see this all the time. I mean, it's like I drive 20 hours a week and maybe not as much as full time, but I see this and I'm like, man, I mean, that hour, maybe I could have been home and spending it with my kid. You can't take
Exactly.
my hour away. You just
Yeah.
can't do that. because that goes completely against your flexibility, freedom. But on the
Mhm.
other hand, you're stealing an hour from me every day. I'm like, no, day has 24 hours. I don't think
Mhm.
you guys can change that with any algorithm you have. So
Mhm.
don't give me my hour back and pay me for it. That's it. So
Yeah.
Joe,
I
man,
would,
I so much
if
appreciate you doing this with me.
I would urge other drivers to do this, to look at it, try and do
Absolutely.
what I did. I've got about 2 dozen rides on Lyft that I did this with, another couple dozen on Uber. Take a screenshot of the trip when it comes in, so you see what their estimate is. Then, as soon as you accept it, you'll get an estimate for the pickup from the Lyft app or from the Uber app. And then when you hit navigate, it usually I use Waze, so it takes
Yeah,
me to Waze app, and that gives me an estimate to the pickup.
yeah,
And as soon as you see that there's a big discrepancy in that first set of numbers, cancel.
yeah.
Take care of, protect yourself.
Yeah, and
And
he
if you want
listen
to
to
do
Joe. I
it for
mean, listen to
yourself,
Joe, people. He has this nailed down. It's an easy thing to do. You're going to do the trip anyway. So if you're going to be out there 8 hours, 20 trips a day minimum,
yeah,
why lose an hour? Do exactly what Joe's suggesting here. And again, man,
you
thank you so
recommend
much.
you
Thank
recommend
you.
doing that where you take screenshots, and this is why I did it because you recommended. I was talking to you about it,
Yeah,
and have a timer on your phone so you actually track the actual time. So you can compare the actual time with the Waze estimate, with the Lyft estimate, with the Uber estimate, and you can figure out what the differences are and where your time is being taken, which app is the one that's taking your time. Yeah.
yeah, I agree with Joe 100%. And please listen to Joe, man. He's a veteran. He knows what he's doing. I wouldn't be talking to him if I didn't trust him. I
Mhm.
trust him fully. I'll go to bat for him any day with his, data and information.
I
And
appreciate that.
we're gonna work on this. We're gonna try to fix this because it's not cool. You cannot steal my time. Again,
Mhm.
Joe, be safe out there, my man. We're gonna keep in touch, obviously,
You too.
and
Thank you.
keep sending me those those Lyft chats. Every time you send me one, I'm like laughing, crying, getting pissed off,
Yeah.
all the emotions above, you know what I mean? And as you know, we're gonna talk to Risher and we're gonna
Yeah.
present these. I mean, hey, this is
It's,
what's
it's a
happening.
tough question. It's got to be a tough question. I mean, this is what's actually happening. And one of the responses I received from Lyft was saying that the system is working the way it's supposed to. They
Oh,
actually say
great.
this in the chat, where this is designed. They don't see any problems. That this is how it was set up, and the
Uh-huh.
system is working perfectly for everybody. This is how it works for everybody.
No,
And so
no,
every
that's not how
time,
it works for you. That doesn't work for me. So no,
yeah,
it's all good. Yeah. But anyway, Joe, thank you, man. Much
all right,
appreciated. Much
sure.
love. Be safe out there, and I'll see you soon. Okay.
Same to you. Thank you.